Amir, I want to go into more detail with the sensory substitution, which sounds fascinating. Can you elaborate on it?
Yeah, so during this research, what we found is that with the blind, before we started I started to work on sensory substitution in Boston, is that the brain have a huge capacity to change in blind individuals. And actually they are a very interesting case in which a huge part of the brain is being left out without the original input it used to process. And what we found in earlier research with blind, in this research that I told you about with object recognition, actually we had a very strange result which we didn't expected, is that when they palpate objects, also when you palpate it, you recognize the objects, right? So and you say the name of the objects. So we just let them as a control learn all the names of the objects in the experiment and just retrieve them from memory. And what we found is that the visual cortex is actually changing dramatically. Even the primary visual cortex change to process actually now memory and not vision. So there is a huge capacity for the brain to change, and instead of processing vision in congenitally blind, even in late blind, process memory. And not only this, we found that they have superior memory capabilities because of this extra area of the brain that is dedicated to it.
So I see. So if you don't use one part, it can be used for a different function.
Exactly.
That's what plasticity means?
That's exactly what plasticity means. It means the capacity of the brain to change. It's plasticity. And the question is, how much can the brain change during the early part of the life? But what we found in part of the research with Alvaro Pascual-Leone in Harvard Medical School was that even if we take a sighted person and we blindfold him for 5 days, and we teach him to read Braille and to walk with a cane, etc., and he starts to rely more on his description of the world instead of seeing it, the visual system starts to tune into memory and to language functions. So there is, even in the adult brain capacity, a great capacity for change. So in sensory substitution, we thought about maybe using this huge part of the brain, as I said, about a quarter or a third of the brain which is dedicated to vision. Maybe we can help the blind to be more independent. Okay, the pioneer of this field was a guy, an American scientist called Paul Bacharita. And his idea was maybe we can use the other senses to communicate the information into the blind instead of the missing eyes. And that's actually applicable to any form of blindness and any age of blindness. So it covers the entire spectrum of blindness. And his initial ideas on this were using touch mainly, like stimulating the tongue or the back. And our approach together with Peter Mayer was to try to use sounds using the auditory system. So the idea is that...
Even though auditory works by association and not by the same way as touch.
Exactly. So here is the nice twist in the story. Usually auditory is being used using association, but using some algorithm, some magic, you can convert the auditory system to being shape system. Okay?
I see.
And this is what you use in sensory substitution. So you would have a tiny webcam. You can put it on a sunglasses, and this can be connected to a computer, and the computer will take the images. We discard the color information, and there is a grayscale it transforms into grayscale, and then there is some method, some algorithm to convey the shapes in vision into shapes in sounds. So I would just give you one small example. It's a very basic one, but just to get a glimpse of the idea. The idea is not that we get a given sound for each visual stimulus, because there is endless, there is infinite number of stimuli, but we teach the relationship between the pixels, between the part of the visual field. So just for example, if we have a diagonal line that goes from the left side of the picture into the right side, okay? So for example, you can encode it with low pitch sounds that going into high pitch sounds. So something
you know
like
it's a diagonal.
Exactly. So it will be something like this. And now if the diagonal line is going from up to down, it will be something like this. And if it's a horizontal line, it will maintain its pitch. So it's just a language. We can't get into the details with such a small amount of time, but the idea is that this language teaches the blind for several hours or days the language to encode from the sounds the original image that was captured by the webcam.
Well, you have a 2.5-minute video on this, and it'll illustrate it for our audience so well. So let's go to that and then come back to our discussion.
Sounds like a plan.
העיגולים, אתה יודעת?
זה עיגולים ממש גדולים. איפה הם נמצאים? בדיוק. ספציפית את שומעת את הנעליים שלך.
די.
ואת הצבעת עליהם ממש 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 בדיוק.
וואו.
זה ממש מעולה. את רוצה ללכת להביא אותם לפי השמיעה?
כן. אבל
תקחי בחשבון שזה לוקח קצת זמן, כן? אני מזיזה את המחשב, כדי שתהיי ניידת, אבל תעצרי שנייה, תסרקי את העולם, אוקיי? לא, עם המצלמה, כאילו, את יודעת בגדול באיפה זה נמצא, אבל את צריכה לתת למצלמה זמן להתמקם, כדי שהיא תשמיע לך את הצליל.
וואו. אני לא מאמינה. די. זה גדול.
בעצם מה שעשית...
Amir, that was a fascinating little clip.
Yeah, and it's...
How does it work in the brain?
So reading or recognizing objects can be achieved by less than 10 or 20 hours of training. And what we were interested in is how the brain is taking the sounds and converting them into visions of reading or of recognizing objects. And here is the really interesting result, I think. What we found is that initially, when the blind listen to the sounds and they have no meaning, there is a activity that's going on in the auditory cortex bilaterally. And this makes sense. And the visual cortex doesn't take much is not very interested in these sounds. But after they pass this initial training phase and they now learn to recognize shapes or to read, we actually get activation in the visual areas. So for example, if they look at a bottle and recognize it, or a door, and knows to walk to this door and go out of this room, there is the same area that we talked about earlier, this LOTV area that was active for vision and touch, but not for audition, starts to be activated for object recognition using the sound modality. So again, this is, and after 30 or 40 hours of training, is active for, even in congenitally blind, for object recognition as strong, almost as strong as when a sighted person is looking at objects. So actually the visual cortex go back to its original mission, but actually it was always his mission. It's just that he didn't know to interpret the information from the sounds. So actually this, if we go back to the original where we started, this actually is another integration or very strong proof for the meta-model theory, because it says this brain area, or maybe all brain areas, don't really care about the sense which the information is delivered. Like if we know to understand the language, it doesn't matter if we are talking now in Hebrew or in English. It's the meaning that is important.
It's magical.
Yeah,
it really is.
So
it's what you do is you effectively invent a new universal language of seeing through sound.
Yes, and that's exactly the
so
goal and the mission.
You know, you say somebody's blind as a bat. You say, well, blind as a bat can see.
Exactly, and it doesn't matter if he's Turkish or Israeli or American or Canadian.
So we have a new language. Let's go to your lab and actually see it.
Let's do it.
Okay, so this is a dad. He's a congenitally blind person, and he's been trained for the last year. He studied this program. He's doing it for 2 hours a week. And right now we are going to show you how he's looking at faces. בוא תנסה לתאר לי מבחינת שיער שאתה שומע פה.
Long hair.
Exactly.
This is face of woman.
Okay, that's right. What can you hear inside the faces? Can you hear mouth, eyes?
The mouth.
Okay. Can you try and tell me if this woman is smiling or is she sad?
Smiley.
Exactly. That's correct. Okay, let's try another one. Okay, what can you tell me about this one?
This is short hair.
Exactly.
This is face of man,
Okay.
and he is smiley.
Okay. What can you hear? Can you hear his eyes? Please tell me when you hear the eyes.
Now.
Exactly. Okay. And can you hear also the ears? Those 9?
Now.
Okay. Very nice.